All right. I am still nursing a little bit of a cheer hangover. We are in the season of just permanent cheer hangover. It is the meat of the cheer season. We are in the thick of it. It's tough, but it's going to go by fast. So try to enjoy it. I don't know. There's no recovering from this point on until like late June for me. So, today I'm actually interrupting our regularly scheduled programming to talk a little bit about the score sheet and how your team's score sheet can be negatively impacted before your athlete even hits the mat, so to speak. So, let's talk about it. I am wearing some new red lipstick. I'm digging it. I never thought that I was a red lipstick kind of girl, but I have been admiring a certain lipstick on people, and I'm like, hey, every time I've been like, hey, I like your lipstick. That's a great color. It's all been the same brand, and I'm digging it. Not sponsored. I'll give this one to them for free. It's the Anastasia brand. They probably don't need my help because people have said that it's like the official red lipstick of Taylor Swift. Although I've heard and read that there are many red lipsticks. I don't know. This one resembles hers, though. I'm inclined to believe it. I like it. I think I really like it. So anyway, got my red lipstick on, got my comfy sweatshirt on. Let's talk about the score sheet. Let's go.
All the moms in the world, let's chat it up. We're talking competitions, uniforms, and all of the above. It's the Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Mom, yes, the Cheer Mom podcast. Cheer Moms, your podcast is on.
Before we get started, I want to talk to you about end of season gifts. If you are looking for gifts for your athlete, for your coaches, for your directors, for your team mom, check out thecheercollection.com. There are beautiful and unique gifts just for them, just for the people that you love the most in the cheer industry. Thecheercollection.com. Enter Cheer Mom Pod at checkout and you'll get a special discount. Also, before we get into the meat of this conversation and talking about score sheets, I want to say how humbled and how grateful I am to have had the opportunity to be close to the NCAA competition. It was a long series of events that led up to having a pop-up near the venue, but still not at the venue. And we'd never done anything like that before. We hit a ton of bumps in the road on the way, but ultimately we had a great party and a great pop-up. I am just so grateful to you who came and went out of your way to come say hi, to come shop. I am beyond grateful to our ambassadors and their families and friends who really helped us to get the word out. You guys made the event a success. Truly, we could not have done it without the help of the ambassadors. So thank you, thank you, thank you from the bottom of my heart. I am just blown away. I had more than one moment in the couple of days leading up to the one day that we did our our pop-up rather, where I was like, oh my gosh, what if this is a terrible idea? What if no one comes? You guys showed up. So thank you so much. We hope to do more fun events like that as we go forward, but I am just I don't mind the cheer hangover. It's a blissful cheer hangover because of the success of the weekend. So anyway, I got sucked into the black hole, the alternate universe even, that is cheer Twitter over the weekend. I don't normally get on cheer Twitter. I don't normally get on cheer Twitter or like Twitter at all as platform. I couldn't tell you why. It's just like not my scene. But we were driving home while the competition was still going on. I wanted to know results. I wanted to know what was going on. So I was refreshing my Twitter or X feed. It's called X now. Does anyone call it X? I guess people do, but like I know it is Twitter. Anyway, so I'm refreshing the feed on the road, and I got some good information. I got a few good laughs. Turns out Justin Carrier, my guy, who is one of the vice presidents at a Varsity All-Star, but is in charge of specifically NCA as one of the many things that I think he does for the company. Turns out he's on Twitter, and he's hilarious on Twitter. So maybe I'm a official Twitter user. I don't know. I don't know, guys. If you follow me on Threads, I'm sorry. If you follow me on Twitter, I'm sorry. Like I don't even know what to like do with that. Anyway, so I got sucked into the the Twitter world, the Twitterverse of cheer. It further solidified that I really am just not a fan of cheer Twitter, because so many children are hiding behind anonymous accounts and bullying, like straight up bullying athletes and entire teams. I don't like it. I don't engage with any of it, but sometimes I just want to comment and be like, seriously, and put them in their place. I don't do that. But Twitter was all abuzz about a certain team's uniforms. So let me back up, and this probably deserves a more in-depth episode, but let me just back up and say that NCA is a marker in the season where a lot of, especially the world's teams, get a refresh. Most teams get routine upgrades or routine changes throughout the season, but NCA, for some of our popular, well-known world's teams, is a time where they are debuting new choreography, in some cases debuting new music. Many teams will get music upgrades, and it's where new uniforms may be introduced. So where these teams might have one uniform for the entire weekend, NCA is typically a weekend where if they are going to introduce a new uniform in the season, now it's their day one and day two. You know, they have a day one uniform and a day two uniform. Rebel and other companies it's a big content weekend. The cheer season is long. I am a fan of these upgrades and refreshes. It re-energizes the athletes. It gives athletes something to look forward to. I think something even as simple as changing your hair. I know that we had a team, it wasn't a world's team, I don't think, several years back, that they changed their hair for one competition, and it went from like a ponytail to braids or something. Even just small changes like hair or a lipstick color change can give the athletes kind of the boost that they need, that shot in the arm that they need to have a new perspective and go out there and perform at a better level or a different level. So I am a fan of these upgrades and refreshes. So there was a team that debuted a uniform at NCA, was getting a lot of attention. You can find out for yourself. I'm not going to put this team on blast. It's a very popular team. I know people involved with this team, and I will say that there is some context behind the way that the uniform looked. And so if you're going to look it up, and if you're screaming at the speaker saying, I know who it was, and it was this, and it was that, I do think that I think we need to look at the context, but also I don't think it's really like our business to be talking about these teams, even as parents. There are a lot of parents that had concerns about this uniform. A lot of moms, not just Twitter, but the Facebook groups were talking about this uniform and just had some things to say. And I don't think that you're entitled to your opinion, but I don't think it's fair to the teams and the athletes for us to go after them and tell them what's what. At the end of the day, they're still kids. It doesn't really do any good to complain into the social media stratosphere. I don't think that solves any problems. I don't think that incites any change. I certainly wanted to discuss the uniforms, and I reached out to a few of my friends and we talked about it and processed through it. And I get wanting to process it, but I'm not going to get into my opinions or talk about the team specifically. The point is that this team received an official deduction on the score sheet citing the image policy. And I think that's a big deal. To my knowledge, that has not happened before, or at least in recent years. So it leads into the discussion of, okay, so let's revisit. And, while I was on Twitter and while I was watching performances and texting my friends with athletes still competing, like, how are they doing? I looked up the USASF and varsity guidelines on these things because people are like, image policy, like, where did that come from? So I looked it up. It is not hard to find. I will link all of this in the show notes of the episode. So I'm going to go through. There are 5 really key and important things that can impact a team's score very negatively that have nothing to do with skill sets or performance. Most of them anyway. Okay, so let's go through that. I am specifically looking at 2 separate documents. One is specific to the USASF Cheerleading World's rules, regulations, and code of conduct. And the other one is the Varsity Summit document, kind of the same name. And it's about deductions and how you can get deductions. It's not necessarily an exhaustive, this is what an athlete fall is worth in deductions. It's more general performance, code of conduct, things like that. Now, when it comes to uniform guidelines, and when it comes to a lot of these things, the Cheerleading World's document is a lot more in depth. It seems like it's a lot more, there's just a lot more here, where there might be one sentence for the summit, there's like a paragraph for the Cheerleading World. So there's going to be a lot more in the Cheerleading World's document. But so for the world's performance standards, they have cover-up guidelines. So athlete with non-full top uniforms must wear a t-shirt or other suitable cover-up over their uniforms unless they are in the warm-up area, traveling as a group directly to or from the warm-up area, or on the performance stage. So this isn't just for world's athletes, this goes for senior athletes too. If you have a crop top, you must be covered up when walking around the venue. I respect and appreciate that guideline, by the way. There is a makeup guideline. Makeup, if worn, should be uniform and appropriate for both the performance and the age of the athletes. Face or eyelid rhinestones are not allowed. False eyelashes are allowed but may not be decorated in rhinestones or additional jewelry. Bows should not be excessive in size. Acceptable bows are generally no more than 4 inches in width and should not be a distraction to the performance. Bows should be worn in a manner to minimize risk for the athletes, should be adequately secured, and should not fall over the forehead into the athlete's eyes or block the view of the athletes while performing. Okay, fine. General uniform guidelines. And this is where If I had to guess, this is where the deduction for this team came in to play at NCA. No risque, sexually provocative, or lingerie looking or inspired uniform or garments allowed. All uniform pieces should adequately cover an athlete and must be secured to eliminate any possible wardrobe malfunction. Appropriate undergarments must be worn. In addition to the following guidelines, athletes must also consider that a combination of uniform pieces may also deem a uniform appropriate or inappropriate. All garments must properly cover the athlete and the athlete's undergarments during the routine. Uniform skirt and short guidelines. When a skirt is worn as part of the uniform, briefs under the skirt are required. The skirt must fully cover the hips, the skirt must completely cover the briefs, and must fall 1 inch below the briefs, regular or boycott briefs. When the shorts are worn as part of the uniform, there must be a minimum of a 2-inch inseam. Uniform top guidelines. Uniform tops must be secured by straps or material over at least one shoulder or around the neck. Tube tops are not allowed. And at the end of this document, it says it's up to the judge's discretion. I wasn't at the judge's table. I don't know what was discussed. I don't know if they were influenced from outside sources. I don't know. But it's very clear here that it's up to officials' discretion on these things. And I think that's why they got the deduction. I think there are a lot of layers there. I think that the athletes don't necessarily choose their uniforms. I don't think that parents necessarily choose the uniforms. There is an argument there where it's like, okay, well, we're paying for these uniforms. Shouldn't we have a say in what they look like? But at the same time, I can picture a director or a gym owner putting a design out to parents and having 100 or 200 opinions and not being able to get anything done. So that's a fine line to walk. I don't know what happened with this team. I don't know how many people were involved in the decision. And I would venture to say most of us don't know that. And so I think we would be wise to feel badly for the athletes and leave it at that. So that is one thing that can affect your athlete's score before they even hit the mat, is the image policy. To my knowledge and in my experience, USASF officials are pretty stringent on the cover-up policy. Our gym has always been very aware of that policy and has not allowed the girls to walk out of a room without some kind of cover-up. And I appreciate that, like I said before. And if the girls don't agree with it, it's like the coaches would say, it's not our rule, it's the USASF's rule. We could get a deduction before you even get there if we don't follow this guideline. So I think it's important. And I think that the deduction that was given at NCA will serve as a warning and an example to many, and will hopefully cause those designing the uniforms and those approving the uniforms to think a little bit about the design of the uniform in terms of the image policy. I'm going to hop on a soapbox just really quickly. This isn't directed at this team or any team in particular. I think in general, every person that has a hand in designing and executing a cheer uniform needs to keep all bodies in mind. There are uniforms that will look great on one body that will not look great on another body. I think that we need to celebrate that we all have different bodies and shapes and body types, and every person needs to feel confident in their cheer uniform. Every cheerleader deserves to feel comfortable and confident in the uniform that they are wearing. We talk about this sport giving girls, especially, self-confidence. The uniform plays a big role in that. And the leaders of our gyms, the leaders in our industry would do well to make sure that the flow of the skirt or the cut of the top or the way that the material lies is going to complement every body type. Okay, I'm going to move on, jumping off of my soapbox. So that's the image policy. Let's move on and talk about time limitations on the mat. This may seem like, oh, well, we all know that it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And shameless plug here, the Cheer Collection has a necklace, a ring, and a bracelet that says 2 minutes and 30 seconds because that's the length of an average cheer routine. So sorry to the prep teams and the non-tumbling teams and the college teams. But anyway, I digress. Their timing is a little bit different. There was a case, I believe it was last year in 2023 at the Cheerleading Worlds, where a team got a deduction, and I don't know what the exact note on the score sheet was, but what was going around social media was excessive shimmying. That could have been the official note, but it was excessive shimmying. And now it's kind of a running joke in the community, like, oh, when you set, don't shimmy. You're going to get a deduction for excessive shimmying. And really, that was not what that deduction was about. It was about the time limitation. So I'm going to read you what the time limitation guidelines are for the Cheerleading Worlds and for the summit. And this is in general the rule for all competitions. I think that they are a little bit more lax on it. Again, I think it's kind of at the discretion of the officials, but when you're competing at the highest level at the Cheerleading World and at the summit and probably at All-Star World Championship too, they have to stay on schedule. They have to follow every rule, cross every T, dot every I. And especially I think with the scoring challenges that the coaches are issuing to the judges. And I know at the All-Star World Championship, the coaches have the right to challenge a judge's decision on another team. We can talk about that at another time, but people are watching closely. And if they can point out even one thing that is going to give them an edge over your team, you better believe that they're going to try to find that one thing. And time limitations are no exception. So this is what the limitation says. Timing will begin with the first movement, voice, or note of music, whichever comes first. So the first movement, if you're moving as a team together and there's more than a few of you doing a shimmy or doing some coordinated move, that's when the timing of your routine starts. Timing will end with the last movement, last voice, or note of music, whichever comes last. Senior divisions, it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Non-tumbling divisions, it's 2 minutes. Global divisions, there's like a 30-second minimum to 40-second maximum for opening cheer portion. It goes on. All introductions, that includes tumbling, entrance chants, spellouts, etc., are considered part of the routine and are timed as part of the performance. There should not be any organized exits or other activities after the official ending of the routine. So you strike that ending pose, get off of the mat, get off of the mat, exit the mat. This goes on to say there is no buffer when competing at the Cheerleading Worlds. It is our suggestion to have your routine time and a few seconds under the maximum time limit so you do not incur an overtime penalty. We got a schedule to keep people. And then there's a whole policy and procedure about how time limits are calculated and assessed and how those deductions are assessed. They have 3 timekeepers. The guidelines for this summit are a little bit shorter, but it's the same idea. Teams that exceed the allotted time by 1 or more seconds are subject to a 0.05 deduction. Judges will use a stopwatch or clock to measure the official time. Judges will not issue a deduction until their stopwatch or clock shows a time that exceeds 3 seconds over the allotted time, acknowledging the potential variance caused by human reaction speed and sound system time variations. So I know that most coaches will have a routine of like 2 minutes and 28 seconds or 2 minutes and 25 seconds so that they have a little bit of a cushion in entering and exiting the mat for this very reason. So we say the routine length is 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Everybody is really, really close to that. But if you really timed it, you might see 2 minutes and 27 seconds too. A lot for this potential deduction. This is another soapbox issue for me, and that is the question of appropriate choreography. There is something in here on the Cheerleading World's guidelines about appropriate choreography. I didn't find it in the quick search that I made, but I'm sure that there is, or there should be, something similar for the summit for the junior and youth aged athletes. I even made a comment at a recent competition. My sister was with me, and I saw some 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds doing some choreography that made me uncomfortable. And I think that that needs to be at the forefront of our minds too. Again, there's such a thing as context, and there are things that even I think are acceptable on the cheer mat that maybe wouldn't be, maybe they would be very out of place in the real world. I mean, most things, but like, there are some things that, okay, fine, it's a cheer thing, whatever. It's not like they're dancing around the house like that. But there are other forms of choreography where they are. I think choreographers need to be very careful about what and how they're teaching the young ones when it comes to some of these moves. I could listen all day long to the argument about feeling comfortable and confident and in control of your own body. I think that I can be convinced by that argument for a senior team and having attitude, and they have more of a control of their body. But asking a 9-year-old to do some of the hip thrusting that I've seen some of them doing doesn't really make sense to me. So there's my soapbox on that. This is the official guideline on appropriate choreography from the USASF. All facets of a performance or routine, including both choreography and music selection, should be appropriate and suitable for family viewing and listening. Examples of inappropriate choreography may include, but are not limited to, movements such as hip thrusting and inappropriate touching gestures, hand-arm movements and signals, slapping, positioning of body parts, and positioning to one another. I think that's pretty self-explanatory. I don't like confrontation, but parents, if you see something, say something. Honestly, that's one area where if you're not comfortable with the choreography, I think it's okay to be like, do they really need to do that? How is that adding to the routine? Again, a world's team, I might be more inclined to let it go over a younger team. But I think if we want to be taken seriously as a sport, this is an element where we need to be evaluating what are we accomplishing with some of these dance moves and choreography. That's not to say that all dance in cheer is wrong or not entertaining or not good. Like, there are some really good dances And on youth teams and senior teams, that's like, wow, that is creative and innovative. And guess what? It didn't involve any sexually suggestive moves at all. So I think that needs to be a continued conversation. If you're sensing or seeing a problem in your gym, let's talk. Gym owners, if you're listening, like, let's talk about it. Let's be upfront about who we are allowing to choreograph our teams. And are you having conversations? Let your parents know. Are you having conversations with the choreographers about the style that you're going after? And parents, that might be why your coaches and gym owners have chosen the choreographers that they have, is because it lines up with the gym's values. And we talk about this all the time. Find the gym that aligns with your family values. I think that gyms are going to show you their values in things like uniform selection and design, and how they talk about their uniforms, and in their choreographer selection, and how they are describing their choreography and the vibe or the brand that they are going for. It's like this reel is going through in my head of all of these different programs and the many, many different teams that I have seen over the season that have completely different, not just styles of cheer routines in general, but styles of dance, styles of technique and creativity. You can find the gym that's right for you and your athlete. If you're willing to overlook maybe a dance thing that you wouldn't agree with because it's the best tumbling gym, like, that's a values conversation that you need to have with you and your family and your athlete. So there are just so many different ways to execute a cheer routine. And that's one of the beautiful things about how creative the cheer industry is that there's, in other sports, a touchdown is a touchdown. A three-pointer is a three-pointer. And we get to have a little bit more leeway in there in terms of creativity and how those things are done that affect our overall score. You can do an alley-oop, but at the end of the day, it's still worth the same amount of points in basketball, whether you do it in style or just barely make it into the basket. So that is one of the advantages of our sport, but it's something to think about how it aligns with your values. I can think of a very specific youth team that does a very good job of delineating dance moves among their athletes. The youth team is 7 to 12-year-olds, 7 to 11 or 12-year-olds. That can be a tough team to manage. I think even junior teams, that can be a tough thing to manage because you have this very clear age gap. And this team does an excellent job of keeping the little girls little in their dance moves and doing cutesy moves, and giving the older girls more of an opportunity to be trendy and relevant. And I think that that is a nuanced thing that is valuable not only to that team's execution, but to the culture that they are creating in their team and at their gym. I might be splitting hairs there, but that's an observation that I've had this season. All right, let's recap. So far, we have image policy, the amount of time spent entering and exiting the mat, and the choreography that can negatively impact a score sheet. That's before they've done one back handspring. That's before they've done one stunt, right? Now let's get into athlete behavior. Now let me reiterate, the end of these documents, it says, and I quote, teams in violation of Any of these safety guidelines or rules and regulations will be subject to deductions and or disqualifications. Keep that in mind when we go to this last little section here. Let's start with the world's level athletes. They're a little bit older, and again, this is a little bit more in depth and specific because we're talking about adults a lot of times who are competing on the world's stage. It says this: athletes of teams at the cheerleading worlds are expected to exhibit the utmost of sportsmanship, respect, and support throughout the entire event. Periodically, there were concerns that a high standard of decorum was not being followed consistently by all teams in the performance venue at performance time, and also by some program members and fans viewing the routine. We'll get to that in a little bit. When teams are introduced, they are expected to take the floor within a 20-second window and assume the starting position for their routine. At the conclusion of the routine, competitors are expected to exit the performance floor immediately, again within a 15-second window of time. From the time the team is announced, the protocol for entering and leaving the competition floor is expected to reflect a team environment. Actions that exhibit excessive boasting, a delay in competition, poor sportsmanship, unprofessional behavior, etc., may be penalized for by event judges. These actions may include, but are not limited to, things such as taunting another team. Taunting may be defined as the use of baiting or taunting acts and or words that engender ill will between teams. An athlete calling unnecessary attention to her or himself, like high fives, chest bumps, etc. Excessive pre- or post-competition team rituals, team bonding traditions must take place behind the stage area. Public displays of affection, which I think that is hilarious that they had to include that. Stepping outside the competition boundary to approach coaching staff, crowd members, and or other members of the audience. Excessive celebration, like athletes wrapping their legs around coaches and or each other, victory dances, etc. Any prolonged, excessive, or premeditated celebration by individual athletes or a group of athletes while on the competition floor. Coaching staff, parents, fans, and or other members of the performing program entering the competition boundary before, during, or after a performance, unless in direct response to an obvious athlete injury. The only people allowed on the performance floor are the competitors and competition personnel. So we can't be like football fans and rush the mat after a good performance. Participants collapsing to the floor. This part is actually hilarious to me. I see that they needed to do it, but it cracks me up to read it every time because I can picture this and I can picture the girls who do this, and I'm sure you can too. Participants collapsing to the floor following a performance when an injury does not seem apparent. It will be assumed that any athlete who is not able to maintain a standing position is in need of medical attention and will be treated as such. So, our over-emotional, dramatic fellow, most of the time females, I see you, I feel you. You cannot have a meltdown even from happiness when you finish your routine on the world's stage. Save it for when you get off the mat. Otherwise, they're going to treat you like you have an injury. Teams will be assessed a point penalty for exhibiting unsportsmanlike, unprofessional, disrespectful, and or unsupportive behavior. The amount of the penalty will be determined by the competition officials. This goes on to say all participants agree to conduct themselves in a manner displaying good sportsmanship throughout and following the tournament. The directors, coaches, and program owners of each team are responsible for seeing that team members, coaches, parents, and other persons affiliated with the team conduct themselves accordingly. Severe cases of unsportsmanlike conduct are grounds for disqualification, as explained in the document above. I'm going to read through the Summit Code of Conduct now. And here's what it says. The team and each participating member and coach should constantly display good sportsmanship throughout the entire performance in regard to respect for themselves, other teams, and the viewing audience of all ages. Teams should refrain from any taunting, bragging, or suggestive expression or gestures, as well as discrimination of any nature. The gym owner and coach of each team is responsible for seeing that team members, coaches, parents, and other persons affiliated with the team conduct themselves accordingly. Severe cases of unsportsmanlike conduct are grounds for disqualification. Any unruly, aggressive, or belligerent behavior by participants, coaches, or spectators toward any other attendee or event staff will result in potential team disqualification, removal from the event, and or barred participation from future championships. We reserve the right to address unsportsmanlike conduct appropriately. Now, there's a few things that I want to go through here. So with the world's, we're talking about athlete behavior and spoiler parent conduct. Those are the last two things that can affect the score sheet before you even get a chance to show the judges what you can do, before your athlete even gets a chance at a championship, right? So athlete behavior. Now, I understand why the world's guidelines are a little bit more in depth, because a lot of those things, not all, but a lot of those things can be, I'll say, testosterone driven. The boys crack me up, especially after they hit a routine. They get this like rush of testosterone, if that's a thing. I don't know how boy hormones work, but they get like this, and I can't demonstrate it on the podcast, but my daughter and I were laughing about it at Worlds last year, where I was like, why do they like do that like V thing, and they like throw their hands down and stick their chest out and go to the front of the mat? It's because they're like so proud that they hit. And a lot of times that can be construed as unsportsmanlike or excessive celebration. We also addressed the girls collapsing to the floor in just overwhelmed emotion. I understand that too, but I see why it needs to be like that for the older kids. Now, notice that they addressed before and after the quote unquote tournament. I just want to say that a Disney cast member has told me on more than one occasion that they have been instructed by their supervisors to alert them of any stunting on Disney property, any stunting or we call it throwing of skills in front of the castle or in the parks. They are on watch. And I really hate this for us, but the cast members and the people of Orlando know when it's cheer season at Disney. And they all have this collective sigh of, oh, the cheerleaders are here. We need to change that reputation. But anyway,
They're keeping
I know
an eye out.
that for stunting, for skills throwing, for anything that the cheerleaders or their parents are doing to cause a disruption, and they've been told that they have the authority to alert varsity officials, and varsity has told them that they will issue deductions or disqualifications if cheerleaders, cheer parents, and cheer programs are causing issues for Disney. So I really want us to hear that. Don't stunt in front of the castle. Don't stunt in the parks. More and more hotels and competition venues now have signage ready in their hotels for when we check in saying, please no stunting in the hotel. Please no tumbling in the hallways. Our reputation is preceding us, and it's not a good look. Notice also, and this is the last thing I'm going to talk about that can affect your athlete's score sheet, your team's score sheet is they sprinkled in there parent and spectator behavior. I'm going to say it again. Team members, coaches, parents, and other persons affiliated with the team conduct themselves accordingly. Severe cases of unsportsmanlike conduct are grounds for disqualification as explained in the document above. Parents are being watched too. I don't know about you, but almost everything that I pack for a cheer competition, especially an end of season cheer competition, has my gym name and logo all over it. Our kids are wearing their gym name and logo all over it. So unless you're going to bring a trench coat to the pool, be mindful of how you're behaving, because these staff people know that their varsity rep or whoever is a phone call or an email away, and that could cost your team. And if you think it doesn't happen, I have a case study for you. Now, I realize that this is an extreme case and a scenario that most of us would, I'd like to think most of us wouldn't find ourselves in. When I first read this story, I kind of laughed. Rather, when I read the headline, I was like, that's funny. Because when the story first, broke, it was, there were parents that we can all probably assume had a little too much drinking around the world at EPCOT, and they were lounging in the fountain in France. In the fountain. They were just cooling off, sitting in the fountain in France. This article said they had their entire bodies in the fountain and were soaking and relaxing like it was a hot tub. Like, not just like splashing in the fountain, not just reaching in and getting somebody wet, like full on, like it was a pool, lounging in the fountain in the French pavilion. So this happened at the Cheerleading Worlds in 2023. Apparently, they were asked, rightfully asked, to please get out of the fountain. This is hearsay. I'm going off memory, but apparently they argued or refused, or I don't know what happened, but it doesn't seem like they were like, okay, yeah, sorry. I think that it could have ended there, but I think we can infer that they refused to get out of this fountain. Well, people were able to identify the guests because of the matching shirts they were wearing. So not only do we know where these parents are from, what gym they're from, now we know who their athletes are. And unfortunately, those athletes began to be cyberbullied because of what their parents were doing. The teenagers weren't there, they were not misbehaving, but the team's social media turned comments off because there was so much hate being thrown toward this team and their athletes. So apparently, due to the behavior of the parents, this team was disqualified from Worlds. So not only is there the obvious teachable moment that our kids are watching us and our behavior at these things, whether it's a cheer competition or the baseball field or the soccer field, we're seeing umpires and sports officials crack down on parents being too involved, being too inebriated, being too belligerent when it comes to their kids' sporting events. I think that we can, for the most part, sit here and say, I would never do that. But sometimes, let's take more of a realistic scenario. What if a security person is not letting you into the competition arena because it's at capacity? Whether you've had anything to drink or not, you are blazing mad because your child competes in two teams. And if that security guard doesn't let you in, you're going to miss your child's competition. That's pretty infuriating. What are you going to do? Are you going to berate the security person. I'm not suggesting that you just say, oh, well, and walk away, but how we conduct ourselves in those moments where we have the right to be angry, we have the right to be frustrated. It would only be natural to get flustered and frustrated. What are we going to do then? And is that going to impact our child's and their team's results? We need to be thinking about those things. I don't think this problem is getting better. I think it's probably getting worse. I see the way that parents are emotionally responding in the heat of the moment to the wrong people. I'm not here to judge because I don't know how I would respond under the same circumstances. I really don't. I would like to say I would handle myself well, but I just really don't. And I don't think a lot of us do. So planning and preparation will help. Knowing how we behave under the influence of alcohol or little sleep or overstimulation or stress or when it comes to cheer competitions, I think should inform, and having a plan should be part of the equation for us because our kids are watching. That's obvious. We all know that, and we all make mistakes. We all misstep, but these competition officials are watching. On a personal note, as a competition vendor, I'm watching. It is very clear sometimes, a lot of times, which programs have explicitly had this conversation with their parents and athletes and which have not. Culture flows from the top down. Whether you have the same worldviews or religious beliefs or theories on cheerleading, the culture of the parents and athletes and how they behave in a cheer setting is a reflection of the gym leadership, whether the gym leadership thinks that or not. Like, oh, this parent is behaving in this way. That's not us. To an extent, it is. And those are things that we should be watching when determining our next move. If we're changing programs, if we're moving, these are all things to keep in your memory bank if you are looking into switching programs. That's not what this episode is about. This episode is about things that can impact the score sheet that have nothing to do with your athletes or their team skills. These are real things, and I think that in light of this recent deduction, whether you agree with it or not, is a warning shot to say, hey, we're paying attention to these things. We should all take note. So what are your thoughts? Send me an email, send me a DM, write a review, only if it's a good one. You can email me and DM the negative things, but I prefer the ratings and reviews only be the positive ones for obvious reasons. But let's talk about it. Hop into the Facebook group, the Cheer Mom Hive. I want to hear your feedback. I want to hear your thoughts on these things. Thank you guys so much for continuing to listen and supporting. We've got some great things coming up. I am, again, just so grateful for all of you. And remember, at the end of the day, whether it's a 0.01 deduction, whether you're mad at the security guard, or you drank around the world a little too hard, a little too fast, it's all just cheerleading.